This year, we're celebrating the 30th anniversary of women being ordained as priests in the Church of England. Brigitte, you were part of the first cohort of women to be priested at Ely Cathedral in May 1994. Maybe you could tell us a bit about your journey to ordination.
I think it was a very long journey. I grew up in the Lutheran church and was very much part of the youth club there. Was quite a keen churchgoer. And then met my husband, who had a strong vocation to work in the third world in water resources development. And when we moved to our first posting in Africa, and I came face to face with suffering and very high child mortality, the faith I had grown up in just wasn't enough, and I left church for a number of years. And then we moved, much later, to Germany, and I worked with very difficult children. And I found that I needed more than my expertise. I needed somebody to help me to love more deeply, to make any change at all. That was an important part of the journey. And then when our children started secondary school, we moved to Cambridge, and I got in touch with the Anglican Church, and it was such a delight. The liturgy sort of provided the structure to help me worship, and I thought, this is my spiritual home. The idea of ministry came up and wouldn't go away. So that's when I went to my vicar, and he said, well, I'm glad you've seen it. I was ordained deacon in 1989. But since the Church of England is a Eucharistic community, it always felt that as if my one hand was tied behind my back.
Skipping ahead to the vote at General Synod in 1992, what more can you tell us about that and how you were feeling around it?
Well, the women deacons of this diocese met and we supported each other, and for me 5 years were long, but for some of them it was a long journey, and so the support was very important. But we also felt that we couldn't wind the clock back had the measure not been passed. So we wrote a paper and mentioned the fact that what was done could not be undone. We were here now, and sent it off to every General Synod member, and we heard that it had been noted. I felt that had the measure not been passed, I would probably have left the ministry, because it was not doable in the long term.
Thinking about the ordination day itself in 1994, can you tell us a bit about what the atmosphere was like?
A lot of it was in a haze, but there are some things. There was this wonderful thing that in the vestry where we were prepared, the clergy wives of the canons had put a jug, and I think a pot of tea, some paracetamol, and a sewing kit, and safety pins. And I just thought, yeah, this is just so thoughtful, you know. When we made our vows, there was this feeling that it was all female, and I thought, we haven't heard it before, and we'll never hear it again. And that was special. But for me, it was the great untying, the freeing, that I now, all the stuff that had led up to it, all the experience I'd had in my life, were being ordained and blessed to be used. And that was very, very important for me, that it was not, the vocation was not a bit aside, but it was the whole me was asked to use it. It was blessed and to be used for good, and that was lovely. And the untying of the deacon's stole was also a very strong symbol of this freeing and untying and blessing.
What did your post-ordination journey look like?
This diocese actually deployed women fairly quickly into proper jobs, which was good. So I became incumbent of 3 parishes. I had a feeling of a sort of imposter syndrome at times, that when they said, called for the vicar, I looked round for somebody else to do that. So that was, I had to grow into that role. We all had to learn to get in what it means to have a woman priest. I still remember one day the church warden said, "We're having a coffee morning, will you bake a cake?" And I said, "I'm busy." Well, she said that the last vicar's wife baked cakes. And I said, "I'm not the vicar's wife, I'm the vicar." And we laughed, but it is that sort of learning of the nitty-gritty details. My style was different from what they knew. It was about giving the laity real responsibility. And I said, have a go, and if it turns out to be a mess, we'll sort it out. So they really had some responsibility, and they could use their experience. My training has told me that listening is so important, listening with an open mind, and we are often too quick to proclaim. But this loving listening is very important. So when I had time, I walked through the village, and I found that people came up and talked to me. Or we just talked about the weather and the family, but it built up a relationship. I am much richer for having been a parish priest and for the experience and the blessing it's given me. I think the good thing is that now occasional church goers don't bat an eyelid when they see a woman. When I first did funerals, people at the door would say, "Oh, it's a woman," so it's become normal, and that's good. But there is still a lot to be done.
How did your ministry change in practical terms from before your ordination to afterwards?
Completely different. The fact that if somebody came and said, maybe informally or sort of confessed something, then I could, in all confidence and without feeling guilty at having broken the rules, I could absolve. I could put my hand on them and bless them. I could be the president, I could preside over the Eucharist, which was bringing the community together on a Sunday. I could bless them and say, go and do your job. And that, there's no comparison to standing next to the vicar and being allowed to hold up the chalice at a certain point. There's just no comparison. It felt that the whole me was doing a proper job.
And finally, what advice would you give to any women who are just starting out on their journey and maybe thinking about pursuing ordination themselves?
Listen to it, live with it, test it, but before you commit, perhaps try something else, and that if it doesn't work out, because it is can be a grueling job as well as a very hugely rewarding job, you have something to fall back on. And if this vocation is real, it will get you. Eventually you will respond, but there's all the time in the world.